You say you want more money, but what you really want is control. Control over what could happen. Control over what might go wrong. Control over the version of life that once felt unpredictable. Because wealth by itself doesn't calm you. You've noticed that. Every time your savings grow, relief lasts a few days, maybe a week. Then your mind starts calculating again. Is it enough? What if something happens? What if I lose this? This isn't greed, it's memory. At some point in your life, money felt unstable. Maybe you grew up watching adults argue about bills. Maybe you saw income disappear suddenly. Maybe you experienced a moment where you felt financially exposed and powerless. Your nervous system remembers that. So now every dollar isn't just currency, it's armor. You don't want luxury, you want insulation. You don't want excess, you want certainty. And certainty is addictive. Because when money increases, you feel temporarily powerful. Not because of what you can buy, but because unpredictability feels slightly further away. But here's the uncomfortable part. No amount of money eliminates uncertainty. It only moves the line. So the number that once felt safe starts feeling fragile, and you chase a higher one. Not for status, not for lifestyle, for control. Stay with me, because once you understand the difference between wealth and control, you start seeing why enough keeps moving, why relaxation never arrives, and why your nervous system is still running software from a life you no longer live. And once you see that clearly, the chase starts losing its grip. Here's what most people misunderstand about money anxiety. It isn't mathematical, it's biological. If you've ever experienced financial instability, even once, your nervous system encoded it as threat, not inconvenience, not discomfort, threat. And the body doesn't forget threats. Maybe it was subtle. Parents whispering about bills, a sudden job loss, a moment when something broke and there was no backup plan. Maybe you were young. Maybe you weren't the one responsible, but your body registered it anyway. Uncertainty equals danger. Let me make this concrete. Imagine someone with $65,000 in savings, stable income, no debt. On paper, they're safe. But on a Tuesday evening, they see a headline about potential layoffs in their industry. Within minutes, they're recalculating, reviewing their emergency fund, mentally cutting expenses that haven't even been threatened. Their chest tightens, their jaw clenches. Nothing changed. The money is still there, the job is still there, but the nervous system activated anyway because it doesn't read bank statements, it reads patterns. And the pattern it learned years ago says this can disappear without warning. That's why $15,000 saved still feels exposed. Why $30,000 brings relief that lasts briefly. Why $60,000 makes you think, now I'm safe, until the next recession headline resets everything. Because the goal was never the number, the goal was emotional certainty. And certainty cannot be purchased. You're not chasing wealth, you're chasing the feeling of never being blindsided again. And that feeling has no price tag. But what happens when that chase starts shaping every decision you make? That's where this gets dangerous. Here's a question worth sitting with. If you doubled your savings tomorrow, would you truly relax, or would your brain immediately calculate a new target? Most people say they'd feel safe at a certain number, but when they reach it, something subtle happens. The number becomes baseline, and baseline never feels extraordinary. It feels normal. And normal doesn't feel protective enough. There's something intoxicating about financial control. Tracking every expense, forecasting every scenario, optimizing every percentage, running projections 5, 10, 15 years ahead. It feels responsible, it feels intelligent, it feels powerful, because control creates the illusion that nothing will surprise you. But here's the truth that's hard to sit with. Control is not the same as safety. You can forecast everything perfectly and still get hit by something you didn't plan for.
You can calculate risk down to decimals and still face randomness. Control reduces anxiety in the moment because it gives you action, and action feels like protection. But safety isn't the absence of uncertainty, it's the capacity to tolerate it. And here's the paradox that traps people for years. The more you try to eliminate uncertainty, the more sensitive you become to it. You monitor headlines more closely. You stress test every decision. You interpret normal fluctuations as threats. Control sharpens vigilance, and vigilance keeps your nervous system permanently activated. So even when the numbers grow, your body doesn't relax, because it was never the number that needed to change. It was the relationship to unpredictability. And until that shifts, wealth won't feel like freedom. It will feel like armor you're constantly reinforcing. But armor has a cost, and that cost is what most people never calculate. At some point, control stops being a strategy and becomes who you are. You're the prepared one, the responsible one, the one who thinks ahead, the one who never gets caught off guard. People rely on you because you have it handled. And slowly, without noticing, your identity fuses with financial competence. So letting go of control doesn't just feel risky, it feels like losing part of yourself. If you don't monitor, optimize, forecast, and calculate, are you still responsible? If you relax your grip, are you careless? Here's the quiet shift that happens. Money stops being a tool. It becomes proof. Proof that you're safe. Proof that you're capable. Proof that you're not the child who once felt instability. Let that land. Because when money becomes proof of your worth, you can't stop accumulating it. Stopping feels like losing evidence, and losing evidence feels like becoming vulnerable again, like reverting to the version of yourself that had no protection. This is where more becomes psychological, not practical. You don't need more liquidity, you need reassurance. You don't need another income stream, you need emotional certainty. But reassurance fades, which is why you refresh accounts, why you rerun projections, why you recheck what you already checked yesterday. Not because you're irresponsible, because you're trying to stabilize something internal with something external. And numbers can't stabilize identity, they can only measure it. If this is starting to feel uncomfortable, pay attention to that discomfort, because it means you're seeing something you've been avoiding. And what you see next explains why this pattern costs more than you think in ways that have nothing to do with money. There's a hidden cost to chasing control. It's not financial, it's experiential. When you're constantly preparing for uncertainty, your body never exits alert mode. You might not look stressed, you might not feel panicked, but you rarely feel fully at ease. Let me show you what this actually costs in lived experience. It's your anniversary dinner. The restaurant is nice, the food is good, your partner is happy. But somewhere in the back of your mind, you're calculating what this costs inside the monthly structure. You're not fully present, you're monitoring. The dinner happens around you instead of with you. It's a vacation you planned for months. Day 1, you check the account. Day 2, you calculate what's left. Day 3, you start thinking about the return, the bills, the re-entry. You never fully arrive because your nervous system never fully left. It's your savings hitting $80,000, and instead of celebration, you feel the weight of protecting it. At $200,000, the responsibility grows heavier because control scales with the number, but your nervous system doesn't scale proportionally. It just stays vigilant, which means wealth can increase without anxiety decreasing. You think the next milestone will relax you, but milestones don't deactivate hypervigilance. They expand what you feel responsible for. Vacations feel temporary, wins feel fragile, savings feel exposed to future events. You're not enjoying security, you're defending it, and defense is exhausting. That's the cost nobody calculates. Not dollars lost, but life experienced through a filter of vigilance instead of presence. If this pattern feels familiar, what comes next is the shift that changes everything, and it starts with a distinction most people have never made.
Here's the shift that changes everything. Security is not control. Security is adaptability. Control says, I need to eliminate uncertainty. Security says, I can handle uncertainty. Those are completely different nervous system states. When you chase control, you're trying to make life predictable. When you build security, you're building resilience. And resilience doesn't require perfection, it requires elasticity. Elasticity means if income drops 20%, you adjust without collapsing. If an emergency hits, you respond without panic. If markets fluctuate, you tolerate without spiraling. Control tries to prevent waves. Security learns how to surf them. And here's the part that feels almost offensive to a high-control personality. At some point, more forecasting doesn't increase safety, it increases attachment. More projections don't reduce risk, they amplify sensitivity. You don't need perfect predictions, you need tolerance for imperfection. Because unpredictability isn't a glitch in life, it's the design. Think about what you've already survived. Income changes you didn't expect, expenses that appeared without warning, markets that dropped, plans that broke, moments that felt like the floor was disappearing, and you're still here. Not because you predicted everything, because you adapted. You handled it. You survived what your nervous system told you would be catastrophic, and it wasn't. That history is evidence, and your nervous system needs evidence more than it needs projections. When your nervous system finally understands that you can survive unpredictability, something shifts. You stop needing wealth to feel powerful and start letting wealth be what it actually is, a tool, not armor. But understanding this intellectually isn't enough. The real question is how you actually make the shift, and that starts with something surprisingly small. Here's a practical exercise that interrupts the control loop. Not a budget, not a spreadsheet, something your nervous system actually responds to. Next time you feel the urge to check your account, to recalculate, to reforecast, pause for 10 seconds and ask yourself one question. Am I checking because something changed or because I need reassurance? If something actually changed, a charge you didn't expect, income that shifted, check and respond. That's rational. But if nothing changed, if you checked 2 hours ago and nothing is different, notice what's actually happening. Your nervous system is asking for a hit of certainty, and giving it that hit reinforces the loop. So instead of checking, sit with the discomfort for 5 minutes, just 5. Let the urge exist without acting on it, and notice what happens. The discomfort peaks and then it fades, not because you got reassurance, but because your nervous system learned for 5 minutes that uncertainty didn't kill you. That's recalibration, not through argument, through experience. Now try a second exercise. Pick one financial decision this week that you would normally over-research. Maybe a purchase under $150, maybe a subscription choice, maybe where to eat. Make the decision in under 2 minutes. Don't optimize, don't compare 7 options. Choose, pay, move on. Then notice. Nothing collapsed. The month didn't break. The structure held. And you just taught your nervous system that imperfect decisions inside a sound structure don't create danger. These exercises aren't about being reckless. They're about proving to your own system that control isn't the only path to safety, that good enough is safe enough, that you don't need to predict everything to survive anything. Small proof, repeated often, rewires more than any insight ever will. And once the rewiring begins, something unexpected starts to happen. There's a moment, usually quiet, when something clicks. You hit a number you once thought would change everything. $50,000 saved, $100,000 invested, 6 months of expenses covered, maybe more. And nothing dramatic happens. No wave of relief, no emotional exhale, no sudden sense of arrival. Just the same mind, still calculating, still scanning, still preparing. That's when the realization starts forming. It was never about money. If it were about money, the number would have solved it. But the number didn't solve it. It just moved the target. Because the goal was never wealth. The goal was certainty. And certainty doesn't exist in numeric form. You weren't trying to be rich. You were trying to never feel powerless again. And that's not a financial objective. It's an emotional one. Here's what makes this moment so important. It's the first time the pattern becomes fully visible. You can finally see the loop from the outside instead of running inside it. You accumulated not because you needed more, but because stopping felt unsafe. You monitored not because things were fragile, but because your nervous system was trained to assume fragility. You controlled not because control worked, but because letting go felt like free fall. And now, standing at a number that objectively represents safety, you feel the same tension you felt with far less. That contrast is the evidence your conscious mind needs to accept what your body has been hiding. The problem was never financial. The problem is that money became your regulation system, your way of managing anxiety, your way of feeling grounded in a world that once felt dangerously unpredictable. And regulation systems don't retire just because circumstances change. They have to be consciously replaced. That replacement is what the next part is about. It's a Saturday morning. You think about checking your account, then you realize there's no reason to. Nothing is due, nothing changed. And instead of the familiar pull toward the app, you feel something unfamiliar. Indifference, not carelessness, calm. The structure is sound, and your nervous system finally believes it. It's a friend suggesting a weekend trip. The old version of you would open a calculator, review the month, simulate impact on savings, and probably decline just to be safe. The current version checks whether the margin exists, confirms it does, and says yes. The whole process takes 30 seconds. No guilt loop, no post-decision anxiety. Just a choice made from clarity instead of fear. It's a market headline about volatility. The old version would spend 2 hours rechecking allocations, running scenarios, preparing for impact. The current version reads it, acknowledges it, and does nothing, because the plan was built for volatility. And a plan built for volatility doesn't need emergency management when volatility arrives. None of this looks impressive from the outside. Nobody celebrates the moment you stopped recalculating. Nobody notices the evening you didn't check your account. Nobody applauds the decision made in 30 seconds instead of 3 days. But internally, everything operates differently. You stop performing security and start experiencing it. You stop defending wealth and start using it. You stop bracing for disaster and start living inside the stability you already built. And ambition doesn't disappear, it recalibrates. When fear isn't choosing your goals, you discover what you actually want, not what your nervous system trained you to chase. That's the real upgrade, not a higher number, a quieter mind. Here's the truth most people spend decades avoiding. You don't want wealth, you want to feel safe. You don't want millions, you want stability that doesn't disappear overnight. You don't want infinite growth, you want unpredictability to stop feeling like a threat. And those are human desires, not greedy ones, not superficial ones, human ones. But if you try to solve emotional safety with infinite accumulation, you'll keep chasing numbers that were never designed to regulate your nervous system. Wealth can support you, it cannot parent you. It cannot calm trauma, it cannot guarantee certainty. And certainty was always the real goal, not the number. At some point, the real work isn't earning more. It's separating control from identity. It's realizing that preparedness is strength, but obsession is fear wearing a suit. And fear doesn't disappear when you dominate it. It disappears when you understand it. The most expensive thing you own isn't your home, your car, or your lifestyle. It's the belief that you need to control everything to be safe. That belief costs you presence. It costs you rest. It costs you the ability to enjoy what you already built. And releasing it doesn't make you careless, it makes you free. This channel isn't about hype, hustle, or getting rich fast. It's about understanding the invisible psychological patterns that decide whether money feels heavy or supportive. If this made you see your relationship with control differently, subscribe, not for strategies, for awareness. Because in the next video, we break down exactly how people rebuild their relationship with money after years of using it as armor. Not theory, not motivation, but the actual process of letting go without losing structure. And once you stop trying to control everything, you start building something stronger than control. You start building trust. And trust feels safer than any number ever could.